Maya Chen had always believed that healing happened in the quiet moments between heartbeats, in the gentle touch of a hand on a fevered brow, in the whispered words of encouragement spoken to someone who might never respond. As she walked through the corridors of St. Mary's Medical Center at 5 in the morning, her soft-soled shoes making barely a sound on the polished linoleum, she carried with her the weight of countless stories, patients who had fought and won, patients who had fought and lost, and patients who existed somewhere in between, suspended in that mysterious realm where consciousness meets the unknown. Room 314 had been her assignment for the past 4 months, ever since Thomas Whitmore had been admitted following a devastating car accident that had left him in a deep coma. The 72-year-old billionaire industrialist had been driving alone on a rain-soaked highway when his Mercedes had collided with a semi-truck. The impact had been severe enough to cause traumatic brain injury, and despite the best efforts of the medical team, he had remained unresponsive ever since. Maya had read about Thomas Whitmore in the newspapers before his accident. The headlines had painted him as a ruthless businessman who had built his fortune in real estate and manufacturing through shrewd deals and aggressive tactics. He was known for his demanding nature, his perfectionist standards, and his reputation for firing employees without warning. The media had dubbed him the Iron Tycoon for his seemingly heartless approach to business. But lying in that hospital bed, connected to machines that monitored every breath and heartbeat, he looked nothing like the formidable figure from the financial pages. He looked like what he was, a vulnerable human being fighting for his life. The nursing staff at St. Mary's rotated assignments regularly, but Maya had specifically requested to remain with Mr. Whitmore. Her colleagues thought she was crazy. "Why would you want to spend your days talking to someone who can't talk back?" her friend Jessica had asked. "Especially someone with his reputation. You know his family barely visits, right? His own children seem to be waiting for him to die so they can inherit his fortune." Maya couldn't explain it, not in words that would make sense to others. There was something about the stillness in room 314 that called to her, something about the way morning light fell across Thomas Whitmore's face that made her believe he was still fighting, still present somewhere behind his closed eyes. She had always been drawn to the most challenging cases, the patients whom others had written off, the ones who needed someone to believe in them when they couldn't believe in themselves. Every morning, Maya would enter room 314 with the same routine. She would check his vital signs, adjust his position to prevent bed sores, and then she would begin to talk. At first, she spoke about practical things, the weather, the news, the activities happening in the hospital. But as days turned into weeks, her conversations became more personal. She told him about her childhood in a small farming town in Iowa, about her decision to become a nurse after watching her grandmother battle cancer, about her dreams of someday opening a free clinic in an underserved community. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," she would say each day, even though he never responded. "It's Maya. I'm here to take care of you today." She believed that hearing was often the last sense to go and the first to return, so she made sure her voice was always gentle, always respectful. She read to him from newspapers and magazines, played soft classical music that seemed to calm his vital signs, and maintained a running commentary about the world outside his window. The other nurses thought Maya was wasting her time, but Dr. Patricia Hoffman, the neurologist overseeing Thomas's case, supported her approach. "There's still so much we don't understand about consciousness," Dr. Hoffman told Maya during one of their weekly consultations. "Studies have shown that coma patients who receive consistent, compassionate care often have better outcomes. What you're doing matters, even if we can't measure it scientifically." Maya's dedication to her patient went beyond her professional duties. She brought flowers from her small apartment garden to brighten his room, arranged family photos that his estranged children had reluctantly provided, and even brought her portable CD player to play music she thought he might enjoy. She researched his background not to judge him, but to understand him better, to find points of connection that might help her reach him. Through her research, Maya discovered that Thomas Whitmore hadn't always been the cold businessman portrayed in the media. In his younger years, he had been married to a woman named Elena, a teacher who had died in a car accident 25 years earlier. After her death, he had thrown himself into his work with an intensity that seemed designed to fill the void left by grief. His relationships with his two children had deteriorated as he became increasingly focused on building his business empire, treating even family interactions as transactions to be managed rather than relationships to be nurtured. Maya began incorporating these discoveries into her daily conversations with Thomas. She would speak about Elena, about the love letters she had found mentioned in old newspaper articles, about the scholarship fund he had quietly established in his wife's memory, a charitable gesture that had never been publicized. She sensed that somewhere in his unconscious state, these references to his past love might serve as anchors, pulling him back toward consciousness. "Your wife was a teacher, wasn't she, Mr. Whitmore?" Maya would say as she adjusted his pillows. "She taught third grade at Roosevelt Elementary. I bet she would have been proud of that scholarship fund you created in her name. 25 years, and you're still helping children get an education because of her." The months passed with no visible change in Thomas's condition. His children, Margaret and David, visited sporadically, usually accompanied by lawyers who seemed more interested in his financial affairs than his medical progress. Maya observed their interactions with growing sadness, seeing how the family's wealth had created barriers rather than bonds, how grief and guilt had hardened into resentment and obligation. Margaret, his 45-year-old daughter, was a successful attorney who had followed in her father's footsteps by building a career based on aggressive tactics and emotional detachment. She rarely stayed in the room for more than 15 minutes, preferring to receive updates from the medical staff rather than sit with her unconscious father. David, 2 years younger, had taken a different path, becoming an artist whose work reflected his sensitivity and creativity, but whose relationship with his father had been strained by years of disappointment and misunderstanding. "He was never really present, even when he was conscious," David told Maya during one of his rare visits. "After our mother died, it was like he died too, but his body just kept going through the motions. He turned into this machine focused only on making money and building his empire. I can't remember the last time we had a real conversation." Maya listened to these revelations with compassion, understanding that the family's pain ran deeper than Thomas's current medical condition. She began to see her role not just as his nurse, but as a bridge between the man he had been and the man he might still become, if given the chance to heal not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. One evening in late autumn, as Maya was finishing her shift, she noticed something different about Thomas's breathing. It was more rhythmic, less mechanical, as if he was beginning to breathe more naturally rather than just existing on life support. She called Dr. Hoffman, who came immediately to examine him. "His brain activity has increased," Dr. Hoffman said after reviewing the latest scans. "It's subtle, but there are signs that he might be starting to emerge from the coma. We need to watch him carefully over the next few days." Maya felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. After 4 months of one-sided conversations and unwavering faith, the possibility that Thomas might actually wake up was both thrilling and terrifying. What if he wasn't the person she had imagined him to be? What if the gentle, caring approach she had taken was met with the harsh, demanding personality described in the media reports? 3 days later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Maya was reading to Thomas from a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt when she noticed his fingers moving slightly. She stopped reading and watched his face carefully, holding her breath. His eyelids fluttered, and for the first time in 4 months, Thomas Whitmore opened his eyes. The awakening was gradual and disorienting. Thomas's eyes moved around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings, the medical equipment, the woman in scrubs who was looking at him with tears of joy in her eyes. Maya pressed the call button to alert the medical team while speaking to him in the same gentle voice he had been hearing for months. "Mr. Whitmore, you're in the hospital. You've been in an accident, but you're safe now. I'm Maya, your nurse. I've been taking care of you." Thomas tried to speak, but his voice was hoarse from months of intubation. Maya offered him small sips of water and continued to speak reassuringly as the medical team arrived to assess his condition. Over the next few hours, as Thomas became more alert and oriented, Maya watched him carefully, looking for signs of the personality she had read about in the newspapers. But the man who emerged from the coma was not the demanding, harsh figure she had expected. Instead, Thomas seemed vulnerable, almost childlike in his confusion and gratitude. His first coherent words were directed at Maya. You, you've been here. I remember your voice. Dr. Hoffman explained that it was common for coma patients to retain some awareness of their surroundings, especially sounds and voices. The consistent, caring presence Maya had provided had likely played a significant role in his recovery. As Thomas's strength returned over the following days, he began to share fragments of memories from his comatose state. I could hear you talking about Elena, he told Maya during one of their conversations. You knew about her, about the scholarship. No one talks about Elena anymore. Everyone acts like she never existed because it makes them uncomfortable to see me sad. Maya saw tears in his eyes, the first emotion she had witnessed from him since his awakening. She was important to you, Maya said simply. Love doesn't disappear just because someone dies. It becomes part of who you are. Over the next 2 weeks, as Thomas regained his physical strength, Maya observed remarkable changes in his personality. The aggressive, demanding businessman seemed to have been replaced by someone more reflective, more aware of the relationships he had damaged and the opportunities he had missed. He spoke about his children with regret, acknowledging the ways his grief had made him distant and controlling. I thought if I worked hard enough, made enough money, built enough success, I could somehow earn my way back to feeling whole, he told Maya. But all I did was build walls between myself and everyone who mattered. Thomas's children were initially skeptical of their father's apparent transformation. Margaret approached his bedside with the caution of someone who had been disappointed too many times to trust easily. David seemed more hopeful but equally guarded. Maya watched these tentative family reunions with a mixture of hope and concern, understanding that real healing would take time and consistent effort. The breakthrough came when Thomas asked David to bring some of his artwork to the hospital room. For years, Thomas had dismissed his son's artistic career as impractical and frivolous. But as David reluctantly shared his paintings, landscapes that captured the beauty and fragility of natural environments, Thomas saw his son's talent with new eyes. These are extraordinary, Thomas said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. You have a gift, David. I was too blind to see it before. David's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of the relief that comes from finally being seen and accepted by someone whose approval had mattered more than he had ever wanted to admit. I've been waiting my whole life to hear you say that, Dad. The reconciliation with Margaret took longer and required more patience. As a successful attorney, she had learned to protect herself from emotional vulnerability, building professional armor that was difficult to remove even with family. But Thomas's genuine efforts to understand her perspective, to acknowledge the ways his emotional absence had affected her childhood, gradually began to soften her defenses. I became like you, Margaret told him during one of their conversations. I learned to see everything as a transaction, every relationship as a negotiation. It's made me successful, but it's also made me lonely. Thomas reached for his daughter's hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable before his accident. I'm sorry, he said simply. I'm sorry I taught you that love was something to be earned rather than something to be given freely. Maya watched these family healing moments with deep satisfaction, understanding that her months of patient care had contributed to something much larger than physical recovery. She had helped create the conditions for emotional and spiritual healing that might not have been possible otherwise. As Thomas prepared to leave the hospital, he asked to speak with Maya privately. I know this might sound strange, he said, but I feel like I know you better than people I've known for decades. You took care of me when I couldn't take care of myself, and you did it with such kindness, such grace. I want to do something to thank you. Maya smiled, understanding that this gesture was important to him. Taking care of you was my job, Mr. Whitmore. But more than that, it was my privilege. Watching you reconnect with your children, seeing your family heal, that's all the thanks I need. Thomas shook his head. I've been thinking about this for days. You mentioned once that you dream of opening a free clinic in an underserved community. I want to help make that dream come true. Maya was speechless. The casual comment she had made months earlier during one of her daily monologues had been heard and remembered. Mr. Whitmore, I can't accept something like that. It's too much. It's not charity, Thomas said firmly. It's an investment. I want to fund your clinic, but I also want to be involved in making it happen. I've spent years building businesses that made money, but didn't necessarily help people. I want to build something that matters. Over the following months, Maya and Thomas worked together to establish the Elena Whitmore Community Health Center, named in honor of his late wife. The facility would provide free medical care to low-income families, with Maya serving as the director of nursing. Thomas used his business expertise to navigate the regulatory requirements and secure additional funding, while Maya designed the clinical programs and hired compassionate staff members who shared her vision of healthcare as a human right, rather than a privilege. The clinic opened 1 year after Thomas's awakening in a renovated building in the city's east side, an area that had been underserved by traditional healthcare facilities. The opening ceremony was attended by Thomas's family, Maya's colleagues from St. Mary's, and dozens of community members who would benefit from the new services. During the dedication ceremony, Thomas spoke about the unexpected journey that had led to this moment. "A year ago, I was a different person," he said to the gathered crowd. "I thought success meant accumulating wealth and power. But I learned something during my time in the hospital, something that a remarkable nurse named Maya taught me through her example. True success is measured by the lives we touch, the healing we facilitate, and the love we give and receive." Maya stood beside him, overwhelmed by the transformation she had witnessed and the role she had played in making it possible. The quiet moments she had spent in room 314, the one-sided conversations, the faith she had maintained when there was no evidence that her efforts mattered, all of it had led to this moment of celebration and hope. David had created a mural for the clinic's waiting area, a beautiful landscape that incorporated images of healing and community. Margaret had provided legal services to establish the clinic's nonprofit status and had even begun volunteering her time to help low-income families navigate healthcare bureaucracy. The Whitmore family had not only healed their internal relationships, but had also channeled their resources and talents toward serving others. As Maya walked through the clinic on its first day of operation, greeting patients and coordinating care, she reflected on the mysterious ways that healing happens. She had entered room 314 4 months earlier as a nurse doing her job, but she had discovered something profound about the power of consistent, compassionate presence. Her willingness to see Thomas Whitmore as a human being worthy of dignity and care had not only helped him recover physically, but had also created the conditions for spiritual and emotional transformation that had rippled outward to touch his entire family, and now an entire community. The miracle in room 314 hadn't been just Thomas's awakening from the coma. The real miracle had been the awakening of compassion, the rediscovery of love, and the recognition that even the most successful person can be transformed by the simple act of being truly seen and cared for by another human being. Years later, when people asked Maya about the most rewarding moment of her nursing career, she would think about that quiet Tuesday morning when Thomas Whitmore opened his eyes for the first time in 4 months. But she would also think about the day the clinic opened, about the families who received care they couldn't otherwise afford, about the children who would grow up healthier because someone had believed that healing happens in the quiet moments between heartbeats, in the gentle touch of a hand, in the whispered words of encouragement that remind us all that we are worthy of love, care, and second chances. The Elena Whitmore Community Health Center became more than just a medical facility. It became a symbol of transformation and hope. Within its first year of operation, the clinic served over 3,000 patients, providing everything from routine checkups to emergency care for families who had previously gone without medical attention due to financial constraints. Maya worked alongside a team of dedicated healthcare professionals who shared her vision of compassionate care, creating an environment where patients felt valued and respected regardless of their ability to pay. Thomas remained actively involved in the clinic's operations, applying his business acumen to expand services and secure sustainable funding. But his approach to leadership had fundamentally changed. Instead of demanding immediate results and treating staff as expendable resources, he listened carefully to Maya and her team, understanding that effective healthcare required patience, empathy, and long-term thinking. He attended monthly staff meetings not as an intimidating executive, but as a grateful partner who valued everyone's contributions. The transformation in Thomas's relationship with his children continued to deepen. David's artwork was displayed throughout the clinic, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere that helped patients feel more comfortable during their visits. His paintings depicted scenes of healing and renewal. Sunrise over mountains, flowers growing through cracks in concrete, hands reaching toward light. Each piece told a story of resilience that resonated with the clinic's mission. Margaret's involvement evolved beyond legal assistance to hands-on volunteering. She established a program to help patients navigate insurance claims and healthcare bureaucracy, using her legal expertise to advocate for people who had never had someone fight for their rights. The work reconnected her with the idealistic young woman who had originally been drawn to law as a means of helping others, before years of corporate practice had hardened her approach to life. One particularly meaningful moment came when Thomas brought his grandchildren to visit the clinic. David's twin daughters, 8-year-old Sophie and Emma, had never really known their grandfather as anything other than the distant, intimidating figure who sent expensive birthday gifts but rarely spent time with them. But at the clinic, they saw him kneeling beside elderly patients, listening to their concerns with genuine interest and treating everyone with the same respect he once reserved only for business associates. "Grandpa, why do you help sick people?" Sophie asked during their tour of the facility. Thomas looked at Maya, who was standing nearby, and smiled. "Because someone once helped me when I was sick, and she taught me that taking care of each other is the most important thing we can do." Maya watched this interaction with deep satisfaction, understanding that the lessons Thomas had learned during his recovery were now being passed on to the next generation. The cycle of healing and compassion was expanding beyond the immediate family to include these young girls who would grow up with a different understanding of what it meant to be successful and fulfilled. The clinic's impact extended throughout the surrounding community in ways that surprised even Maya. Local businesses began partnering with the facility to provide job training programs for unemployed residents. A nearby church started offering childcare services during clinic hours, making it easier for parents to receive medical attention. High school students volunteered as translators and assistants, gaining valuable experience while serving their neighbors. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, who had supported Maya's approach during Thomas's coma, joined the clinic's board of directors and helped establish partnerships with major hospitals to ensure that patients requiring specialized care could access those services regardless of their financial situation. She often remarked that the Eleanor Whitmore Community Health Center represented the kind of health care she had dreamed of providing when she first entered medical school. Thomas's business associates initially viewed his involvement with the clinic with skepticism and concern. They worried that his brush with death had made him soft, that his focus on philanthropy would negatively impact his other business interests. But they discovered that his new approach to leadership, informed by empathy and long-term thinking, actually improved his company's performance. Employee satisfaction increased, turnover decreased, and productivity reached new heights as workers felt valued and respected. The annual board meeting of Whitmore Industries, held 2 years after Thomas's recovery, was unlike any corporate gathering the company had ever experienced. Instead of focusing solely on profit margins and market expansion, Thomas spoke about the importance of corporate responsibility and the ways that successful businesses could contribute to community well-being. He announced the establishment of a scholarship program for children from low-income families, funded by a percentage of the company's annual profits. "I spent decades believing that business was about maximizing returns for shareholders," Thomas told the assembled executives. "But I've learned that true success comes from maximizing returns for all stakeholders, employees, customers, communities, and yes, shareholders too. When we invest in people's well-being, everyone benefits." Maya attended that board meeting as Thomas's guest, representing the clinic's ongoing partnership with Whitmore Industries. As she listened to him speak about the values that now guided his business decisions, she remembered the unconscious man she had cared for in room 314, the person everyone had written off as cold and ruthless. The transformation had been gradual and sometimes difficult, requiring Thomas to confront painful truths about the choices he had made after Elena's death. But his willingness to change, supported by the love and patience of his family, had created something beautiful. The clinic celebrated its 3rd anniversary with a community festival that drew hundreds of residents from the surrounding neighborhoods. Food trucks donated meals, local musicians provided entertainment, and families enjoyed games and activities while learning about healthcare resources. Thomas and Maya stood together watching the celebration, both amazed by what had grown from those quiet conversations in a hospital room. "You know," Thomas said to Maya as they observed children playing on the bounce house that David had organized, "I used to think that my legacy would be the buildings I constructed, the companies I built, the wealth I accumulated. But now I realize that none of that matters compared to this." He gestured toward the families enjoying the festival. "This is what I want to be remembered for: the healing we facilitated, the community we served, the love we shared." Maya nodded, understanding that Thomas's journey from coma patient to community advocate had been about more than physical recovery. It had been about rediscovering his humanity, reconnecting with the values that had guided him before grief and loss had hardened his heart. The man who had awakened in room 314 was not a different person from the one who had fallen into the coma. He was the same person, healed and whole, finally able to express the compassion that had always existed beneath the protective armor he had worn for so many years. As the festival continued into the evening, Maya reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. She had begun her career believing that nursing was about providing medical care to patients who needed healing. But her experience with Thomas had taught her that healing was often mutual, that caregivers received as much as they gave, that the simple act of showing up consistently with compassion and respect could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. The Elena Whitmore Community Health Center continued to grow and evolve, eventually expanding to include mental health services, dental care, and wellness programs. Maya completed her master's degree in nursing administration with Thomas's encouragement and financial support, ensuring that she had the credentials and knowledge necessary to lead the facility into the future. She married Dr. James Morrison, a family physician who had joined the clinic in its second year, drawn by its mission and Maya's leadership. Thomas walked Maya down the aisle at her wedding, a gesture that symbolized the deep bond that had formed between them through their shared commitment to healing and service. In his speech at the reception, he spoke about the nurse who had seen potential for recovery when everyone else saw only a lost cause, who had talked to him for months when he couldn't respond, who had believed in the possibility of transformation even when there was no evidence to support that faith. "Maya taught me that miracles don't always announce themselves with dramatic fanfare," Thomas said to the wedding guests. "Sometimes they happen quietly, in daily acts of kindness, in consistent presence, in the simple decision to treat another person with dignity and respect." She performed a miracle in room 314, not by bringing me back from the coma, but by helping me remember who I was meant to be. The story of Maya and Thomas became legendary within the healthcare community, studied in nursing schools as an example of the profound impact that compassionate care could have on patient outcomes. But for Maya, the most important aspect of their story was not the recognition it brought or the successful clinic they had built together. It was the reminder that every patient, no matter how difficult or unresponsive, deserved to be seen as a complete human being with a story worth hearing, a life worth saving, and potential for growth and change that might surprise everyone, including themselves. Years later, as Maya continued to serve as the clinic's director of nursing, she would sometimes pause in her busy schedule to visit room 314 at St. Mary's Medical Center. The room looked the same as it had during those months when Thomas lay unconscious, but it held different patients now, people fighting their own battles with illness and injury. Maya would quietly observe the nurses caring for these patients, hoping that they too understood the power of their presence, the importance of their words, and the miracle that could unfold when one human being committed to caring for another with unwavering compassion and respect.